Hi folks, Rosemary here with Travel with Ro. Today we are going to talk about a disability packing list for your cruise. So, Disney's my favorite. I'm going to be talking about Disney a bit, but most of these tips work for any cruise that you're going on. I'm going to be talking about top 3 tips for things to pack, and then top 3 things to do, sort of like prepping for the cruise. So as far as I'm concerned, that kind of fits into the whole packing thing. Now, these are not going to be 3 tiny little items. It's going to be 3 categories of items. So bear with me, because number 1 is medication. And I know you're going to be like, Rosemary, come on, I am not going to forget my meds, right? We all know that. And I got a cat here on me. But there's a little bit more layering to that. So you want to remember your prescription meds, obviously. Try to bring them in the actual packaging that they came in from the pharmacy, or at the very least take pictures of the pharmacy bottles with your prescriptions on them, just in case something happens. Because I know a lot of people probably travel like me with one of these things, and it's full of all your pills and all the over-the-counter stuff. But just in case, at least have photographs of the bottles in case there's an emergency. You're in another country and you need to get your meds refilled, or even on the cruise ship, it's still easier if you have the prescription. You could also bring an actual prescription as well. So over-the-counter medicine is part of that. You want to make sure you bring all your little stuff that you take, whether it's store brand or not. You know, I tend to get whatever's on hand. But make sure you bring the over-the-counter meds with you that you regularly use, because it is just cheaper and easier to already have them on hand in your room, in your stateroom, than if you need to go down to the clinic or seek them out at guest services. Guest services usually will give like a single dose of stuff to tide you over if the stores are closed, because on cruise ships, oftentimes the stores are closed when you're in port. So it's a thing about taxes, but either way, if you were trying to get into Mickey's main sale and go buy some Tylenol, they're closed while you're in port. So keep that in mind. Anything you think you're going to be using regularly, whether it's the pain meds or even cough syrup, just bring it. If you think you might need it, it's just so much better to have it. That includes things like, you know, swimmer's ear, if you have sensitivities there, aloe, sunscreen. Please, if you have like sun sensitivity, don't forget sunscreen. Especially if you're going to like the Caribbean. Now, I'm not talking about like Alaska or Europe right now, but like you're going down into the Caribbean, Mexico. Trust me, I live in Florida. Even on a cloudy day, you can get a sunburn. So if you're sensitive to sun, make sure you're wearing sunscreen and you bring aloe. This might sound a little funny, but part of medication, I'm including snacks, because sometimes the blood sugar drops and you just need something. Now, I get, for example, these little 100 calorie packs because they're individually wrapped. I haven't opened this one yet, but they're individually wrapped. And I know it's like, oh, all that extra packaging and plastic, you know, it's like, sure, in my kids' lunches, I might buy a big container and then stick them in a little reusable container. But when I'm going on trips, these are already wrapped. And all of our family, we all like cashews. And these are a great thing to sort of just pick up when you're starving. And there's a ton of food on your cruise, right? All cruises have a ton of food, especially Disney. They have the different restaurants open at different times. With Disney, the room service is 24/7 and it's free. So you're gonna have food accessible to you, but sometimes you just need a little extra something, whether you're sitting in the port waiting to board, if you're going on an excursion. And the same thing with excursions, which applies to the ships, is things have to be factory sealed. So in the manufacturer's packaging, they won't let you just take a baggie of, you know, you buy a big thing of nuts or goldfish or something and then individually stick it in a bunch of baggies. They will take that from you. Everything you bring on the ship or off onto your excursion has to be factory sealed. So think about that. Remember to bring them in your carry-on, not your checked bags. I suggest even for airports with that, I like to carry all my meds with me. But even at the port too, the checked luggage, don't be putting your medication in there. You might not see it for a few hours. It could take some time to get your package on board. Your suitcase might not be to your room for a couple of hours. That also includes any medical equipment. So if you have, an oxygen tank or something, and it's something you got to carry with you, please bring it in your carry-on, if possible. And also doctor's notes. If you have any type of doctor's notes for anything like, I've just lost the word, but you have something in your body that's metal or a pacemaker or something like that, where it's like your doctor doesn't want you going through the security things, because there's the little security stands when you're getting on and off the ship. So if you have some reason you can't go through one of those, bring the note with you in your carry-on. Any type of thing where you have a note, and that even includes like food allergies, if you have a specific requirement for medicine, food, things like that, get the note, bring it with you, get it translated into whatever language of whatever country that you're visiting. So, you got a severe allergy, make sure, you're going to Mexico, get it in Spanish and English, things like that. When you're traveling, make sure to think about the languages of where you're going and try to carry all the notes that you have with you. Number 2, second thing you need to remember to pack is your pain accommodations. So whatever you need to accommodate your pain or your conditions of and whatever it is with you, because everybody's different. For me, there are certain things that I use. I live on my heating pad. This is my latest one because, I break these things because I pretty much live on these at home. It helps with pain management for me. And different things like that. Now, you cannot bring a traditional heating pad on a cruise ship, so that's something you got to think about ahead of time. Now, we have little things that I've used maybe camping, like the little Thermacare patches or the hot hands. It's not quite the same, but if I'm just going camping for a night, also things like, I do have some of these. I ran out of a lot of the other stuff, but like the icy hot pain patches and stuff like that. These are different things you could use instead. It's also more travel size. Something like this, when you look at the little patch, it does not take up a whole lot of room in your suitcase to stick 1 or 2 of these in your suitcase. But a heating pad would. They do sell battery operated heating pads. I don't have one, they're a little more expensive. So, but I will link to an example. In the description, I'll link to also just a packing list that you can print from my blog, but also like things like the battery operated heating pad, they exist. There are vests too that you can get, all different kinds of stuff. So it's something to think about if you travel a lot, or possibly if you're going on a really long cruise. Like you're going on a 20 day cruise and you got some pain issues, you might want to consider something like that. Along those lines, something like Epsom salts are things that I wind up using in the bath a lot for my feet. And I also have a magnesium spray and stuff like that. Now, some of those, I can get a little travel size bottle for the magnesium spray, and the Epsom salts, you can put those in a tiny bottle too. There are bathtubs on some cruise ships. The Disney ships have bathtubs, except in the accessible rooms. The accessible rooms have a roll-in shower, which is really great because I got the seat, which is really convenient, but you can't soak your feet, just saying. Now for me, getting in and out of the bathtub is also that's something you might want to consider. You might not want to get in and out of the bathtub, so you might want the accessible room if you can. Okay, another thing to consider is you may or may not be doing a lot of walking. Again, this totally depends on you. We'll talk about transportation in a minute, like wheelchairs, but if you're going to be doing some walking, and if walking is not something you can do much of, like me, you want to make sure to maybe bring like a shoe insert. These are not necessarily my favorite. I just happen to have these on hand. This is what I used last time I went walking, and they were okay. But essentially bring something for your feet, sort of like we were talking about, like the Epsom salt, something. If you think you're going to be doing walking on excursions or things like that and you got foot issues, you'll want something like that. Another thing is staying hydrated. this might seem like a weird thing to stick into the pain accommodation category, but for me, it makes a big difference. If I'm dehydrated, everything is bad. My whole body goes bad. And this is something that you can do with electrolyte drinks. Now you gotta be careful about bringing drinks on the cruise ship. There's some drinks they won't let you keep. You know, you're allowed to bring water and Gatorade and stuff like that, but like only certain amounts. You gotta carry it on. There is some Gatorade on Castaway Cay sometimes. There's something similar on the cruise ships sometimes, and these things can change though. So like if you really get dehydrated, I would suggest a little packet of like the electrolyte, like powdered drinks that you can add to water yourself, because again, it has to be manufactured, factory sealed. You know, it can't be something that's open. If you were to bring, like, for example, a protein drink, a protein powder mix, it's still got to be factory sealed when you bring it on. So think about that. Anything that you use like that, some sort of supplement that you might take, it got to be factory sealed when it comes on the ship, okay? And that even goes for things like baby foods or pureed foods or things like that. Now remember, the chefs can puree almost anything for you. So that type of stuff, if you have like a feeding tube or something, they can work with you on that. They're already trained in that and experienced. They know what they're doing. So that's always an option. Always talk to you know, guest services ahead of time, and we'll get into that. But that's just something to keep in mind. For me, pain accommodation also includes compression socks. Now I got fancy ones here. I also have like my dad's old compression socks that are, you know, like white and go up to your knees and stuff like that. Well, these go up to your knees too, but they're pretty. I got lots of designs. Compression socks come in all different kinds of styles. These are something that help me a lot when I'm traveling. I tend to overheat when I'm wearing them, so I can't necessarily walk around in them, but at night, when I get off my feet, putting these on makes a huge difference. So think about compression socks, bringing them, because they roll up all tiny. See that? So you just shove that in your bag, and these are good to have. I seriously recommend compression socks. Another thing that I feel kind of fits into the pain accommodation section is something like this. This is a fan that I use because I have issues with heat and humidity. If it is too hot, I can't breathe. So that's something to take into consideration, because I live in Florida and I can't handle the weather. I live here all the time. If you're going somewhere like the Caribbean, you know, or South America, you check the weather, see what it's like, see what the humidity levels are like, because, oh, did you hear that? Ah, there are lots of different types of things. This is a neck fan, so I put it around here, and I'm gonna turn that off, but this helps me to regulate my temperature. That's something that you can keep in mind. I highly suggest things like this type of neck fan is so small. It is so small and compact and easy to pack in a backpack, or just wear it around your neck because it barely weighs anything. So please keep in mind the weather, where you're going, even humidity levels, that type of thing, because that might affect your health. It's something that, you know, you need to know ahead of time. What's it going to be like? Is there going to be a lot of humidity? Make sure you look that up before you head out. Okay, top 3 packing list. Number 3, it is transportation. So, a couple of things you want to think about when you're cruising is the amount of space that you have. So for example, if you use a cane or a walker, or a wheelchair, you might want to consider getting one that folds. I use this cane. I don't know if you've seen it in any of my other videos or not. You might have seen it in 1 or 2 of my vlogs, because this is what I use. Sometimes it's there in the mirror. This one folds down. Mine folds in half. I found that this is convenient enough for me. There are ones that fold down like 4 times. Like this is only in 2 pieces. And there are ones that fold down like 4 times, and this little doohickey here comes off and tapes it together. This can fit in a backpack fairly conveniently for me. I've also put it in scooter baskets, things like that, and it's really easy to go back together. And that's it. It's already back together. I've found that sometimes people complain when there's too many sections that it makes a lot of noise when you walk. This one barely makes noise, and it feels really sturdy for me. So that's why I use a folding cane. It's like my all the time cane, but it's really convenient for traveling. Like I said, I can stick it in a backpack if I need to. Same thing with even like a wheelchair or a walker, especially if you don't need it 24/7. You know, kind of like me, like I can go short distances, so I can walk around my cabin just fine, you know, things like that. It's when I'm walking all the way to like a restaurant on the other side of the ship, you know, things like that. So along the lines of transportation, wheelchairs and scooters. So this is something that you want to arrange ahead of time. And, you know, if you got a travel agent, they can help you out with that. But you need to rent them ahead of time. There are some available on Disney ships. You will always see somebody somewhere commenting, oh, I just borrowed one, it was fine. They're technically there for emergency purposes only. So you can't just get on a ship and just be like, hey, I need a wheelchair, can I grab one? And it's not like that. You have to rent them from a separate company ahead of time. There are a couple of companies that will deliver to the port for you. Except on Castaway Cay, they have the all-terrain wheelchairs with the big wheels, so it can roll out onto the sand and into the water. So those are right there. When you get off the ship at Castaway, they'll be there. So that's kind of handy. But that's just on Castaway. So if you are going to be on the ship and you need a scooter, make sure you rent it ahead of time if you don't already own one. And think about space-wise. Cruise ships tend to be tight. Hallways can be tight. Elevators can be tight. And if you can get an accessible room, that is great. If you don't think you need an accessible room, or you just didn't want one for some reason, you won't really be able to fit a scooter into the room. You can park it in the hallway, and the room steward can move it for you and store it somewhere else. That's a little bit though inconvenient, because then you gotta contact guest service and be like, oh, I need my scooter, can you bring it back? You know, or find your steward or whatever, because you can't really leave it in the hallway all the time. The hallways are not that big. So an accessible room would be best, especially because they have that roll-in shower like I mentioned. So, you know, for wheelchairs and whatnot, you can just sort of, the showers are big and with the fold up and down seat. So just think about space when you're thinking about, you know, how you're gonna get around. So those were the top 3 things that you gotta keep in mind when you're packing. What kind of medication do you need, including over the counter and pictures of your prescriptions? What do you need for pain accommodation? So what kind of stuff, you know, are you gonna bring to help you because you're moving around more than normal? And transportation, how are you getting around? Those are my top 3 packing tips, but I got a couple of other tips. These are sort of more of a to do ahead of time. Okay, so tip number 1 is get familiar with the layout of the ship ahead of time. You don't want to be going from deck to deck, back and forth, looking for what you're looking for. Some ships are small, you know, you get on the Magic, it's a little bit smaller, but then you get on something like the Wish, it's a little bit bigger. And so you want to know where you're going ahead of time so that you're not just wandering around. I know, like for me, it's like, it makes a difference if I'm walking this much or if I'm walking this much. It makes a difference. So what you want to do ahead of time is watch tours of the ship on YouTube, like deck by deck tours, not just people randomly walking around like vlogs, which I love. I make vlogs, I watch vlogs, but I'm talking deck by deck so that you can see ahead of time where everything is and get familiar with it. Look up the deck plans and make notes of the places you think you're going to go the most, you know, so you'd be like, let's see, Marcel and Market is on deck 11 aft. I'm not sure that's right. Don't quote me on that. But, write it down ahead of time. What deck, after forward, for the buffet, for the kids club, for the pools. Write down where it is. Keep it in a little tiny card, in your wallet, just so that you know where you're going. Keep in mind that Disney has 24-hour free room service, except for when you're disembarking that morning. But aside from that, you got 24-hour free room service. So if you just can't walk, you're like, I can't do it. I can't get out of bed right now. That's fine. Just order room service. You got to tip them, but room service itself is free except for sodas and stuff like that. For the most part, there are a few extras, but for the most part, it's free. You can just get yourself some food so you can't get out of bed. Don't worry about it. Hang out there, get your room service. Tip number 2, print out all of your special instructions or medical info or the medication descriptions, anything like that you might need, anything that might involve talking to a doctor. For example, we already talked about, having copies of your prescriptions, even if just photos, just something, having copies of the prescriptions, and anything that the family members might need to help communicate on your behalf to a clinic or an actual hospital, depending on where you're at. If you're in another country, make sure it's translated, like I mentioned before. So medication lists, actual prescriptions, food restrictions, medical plans of any kind, make sure you have those things printed somewhere. And then translated if need be, and that somebody that you're traveling with, like if you're the one who's disabled, make sure somebody else that you're traveling with has that information. So, if something happens, you got to go to the clinic and you can't communicate, that somebody else in your party can't. It's just helpful to have all that stuff written down, because hopefully you won't need any of it, but it's better to just have it and not need it than, not have it and you're sitting there trying to go, oh, I forgot the name of that medicine that I take on this occasion, and it's like, what do I take when I get migraines? Like, just have it written down already. All right. Tip number 3, make your special requests ahead of time. Now, of course, you can make special requests on board if there's something you forget, but it's always best to do these things ahead of time, especially for allergy and food requirements, for example, so that they can have that stuff on hand beforehand. If you're gluten-free, if you have an allergy, you'll want to discuss, you'll want to put it in the special requests section. Like, for example, on Disney, you can put it in the app or on the website ahead of time. And then when you get there, you want to talk to your wait staff. There'll be like a section in the ship somewhere where you can talk to the dining staff, the head waiters, things like that, and let them know ahead of time. This also goes for like if you need your food pureed or something like that. Like, you can talk to them ahead of time if you got an autistic kid will only eat one certain food, just let them know ahead of time. And then also, once you get on the ship, make sure you talk to your wait staff once you're there, because on Disney, your wait staff follows you around from restaurant to restaurant. So while you're changing which restaurant you're in, your waiters are going to go along with you. So you'll have the same waiter every night. They get to know what you like and what you don't like, but also your special requests. So you want to talk to them about that ahead of time. Other special requests are things like, for example, you got a CPAP machine. You can request ahead of time that they send a gallon of distilled water to your room. It'll be there when you get there, or delivered with your luggage at any point. Anyway, you can get the distilled water for the CPAP machines, so you don't have to carry it on with you. Because water, you gotta carry on with you. And I mean, again, I don't know about you, but for me, I can't carry much. So like any like purse or backpack that's like bigger than this, anything that carries more than my wallet and my phone and my inhaler, forget about it. My husband has to carry all that stuff because it's too much. I can't do it. So, for me, I'm like, I can't carry on all these water. You can get distilled water delivered to your room for things like that. If you have medication that has to be at a certain temperature, that's something else you might want to notate. Now, every room has a fridge. The fridge stays kind of cold, but if it's not cold enough for you, bring a thermometer, a fridge thermometer. If your medication has to be at a certain temperature, bring a fridge thermometer, and you can request ice from the room steward. Just let them know you're going to want fresh ice every day, just to keep it a little bit colder if you need it. And you can always go talk to the clinic on board if you have any specific concerns about your medication. Stateroom bathrooms should have sharps containers. So if you have needles or anything like that that you need to dispose of, there should be a sharps container there available for you. But if for some reason there isn't, just contact guest services and ask for one. So that's something that you should have. Another thing that you want to do is, and I kind of touched on this before, is if you're going on an excursion, make sure you bring something with you, like a little card that says, you know, I'm allergic to peanuts in like the local language as well as in English. So you have something with you, you know, in the local language that says what your restrictions are, whether it's dietary, whether it's a medical condition, whatever it is that you think you might have to communicate to someone. Make sure you prep that ahead of time and have it on a little printed card or piece of paper or something like that. So, reviewing, the 3 tips were: get familiar with the ship ahead of time. You really want to know the layout. It'll just make it such a better journey for you. Print out all your medical stuff ahead of time that you think you might need, and make your special requests before you even get on the ship, so you don't have to stand in line at guest services any more than necessary. You can usually make an appointment with guest services too, so you don't have to stand in line. Just FYI, keep that in mind. And if you have a travel agent, you know, just saying, travel advisors can go ahead and make those special requests for you ahead of time. Okay, side note that I want to mention is just a reminder that the ADA, the American with Disabilities Act, it only applies in the United States. So please keep that in mind. The same way with the DDA, the Disability Discrimination Act, only applies in the UK. So please keep that in mind when you're traveling, especially if you are mobility challenged in any way. Like, while the ships are accessible and while many places will be accessible, some places might not be, and you might not find what you're used to at home in places where you're going. So it's just something to keep in mind when you travel. You know, the ships are registered with other countries. Disney ships are registered in the Bahamas. So while it doesn't really, the ADA doesn't really apply to it, it's those accommodations are still there, but don't expect the same level everywhere you go. You might go into a port where you have to tender in, so the ship can't pull right up to the shore or to the dock on shore, so you have to get in a little tiny boat to tender that will take you from the ship onto land, and that can be hard. There can be stairs, all kinds of stuff. Once you get into some of these ports, even if the ship pulls right up, there could be stairs and stuff like that. Some places may not be wheelchair accessible. So essentially you need to just do research ahead of time. You know, like, I'm not saying don't travel. That's not what I'm saying at all, because I totally believe everybody should be able to get out and travel. Just keep in mind to research the places you're going ahead of time. Some excursions might not be wheelchair accessible, for example, or they might just require a lot of walking. If you're someone that can't do a lot of walking, you need to know that ahead of time. Okay, so in closing, I just want to say, make sure you discuss any needs that you might have with your travel advisor ahead of time. And they can help you out with booking things like scooters and wheelchairs, making the special dining requests, or any other kind of special requests that you might have ahead of time. Plus, they can give you tips. They can guide you on which excursions might be better than others. So if this video was useful for you at all, please let me know in the comment section. Please like and subscribe for more videos. I will be posting other packing lists, like general packing lists, and I will be having lots of cruise vlogs coming up and stuff like that. So please subscribe, stay tuned for more, and happy travels. Be sure to visit my website at travelwithro.com, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.